Good morning, everyone. Every once in a while, these little miracles, what we call miracles, those moments where we tune into what Shama was just reading about to us, the fact that we're this vibration that she was talking about of Om. It's that vibration, very vibration, which holds all of our souls together. And I hope to come back to that in a couple of minutes, but I've been away for a month, which many of you know, and it feels like a long time. Today's the first day that I'm back at Sunday service, and the first 2 weeks of that time away, I was in Israel, and it took me totally by surprise. This is not at all the point of the sermon, so I'm going to shorten this part of it, but I loved being in Israel. It stole my heart. It lifted my soul up. It was a very compelling experience there, and I really didn't want to leave. I wasn't ready to leave, which is rather unusual for me. Whenever I go anywhere other than seclusion, I'm usually very ready to come home, more than ready, by 2 weeks. But I just didn't want to leave there. I really felt that I belonged there in a way. And I looked at Asha, who was traveling with me the night before we were leaving. I'm going to speak for her just for a moment, but I think we were both feeling some of this sadness. We both felt this beauty of spirit flowing through us there. And I said to her, isn't it just the most beautiful miracle that we have a home to come home to that we love? Because if it was anything other than this community, I was about to become an Israeli. And I didn't know I was going to say that to you, but as I was just sitting here, I thought, I have to tell all these people how deeply touched I am that you're my family, and I love coming home to you. And then the choir gets up and sings this beautiful song. Is there anywhere on earth? And B. Raj says, it's just a song about coming home and community. So here we are, just all on the same wavelength, really. You know, this reading is, it's so big. This is the interesting thing about Avatar. It has this huge implication of these great souls that come. Really, when we call for them, they come in response to a loving call. But nonetheless, they come, and they've come for thousands of years in response to many different calls. And then, as Swamiji says in the reading, so it's got this huge global effect, and then it has this extraordinary individual meaning too. It's on the macro and on the micro that the avatar exists, and that's just so thrilling. Swamiji makes it seem just so easy to tune in, to plug in, and to realize that we all are made manifest through this vibration. You know, many times I've wanted to get up here and say, let's look at how Swamiji has built on these 52 readings. But usually when I think of it, it's about week 40 or something. And I think, oh, that's not going to work. Go back to week 1 and say, look, then he talked about this and then that. But here we are at week 5, and it's doable. And I think it's very important to be able to have an experience of this truth, that it is our job in this life to have an incarnation of the avatar within us. So I'm going to go back to week 1, where Swamiji, the question that Swamiji put before us in week 1 is, did God create the world or become it? And of course, The answer was, I didn't give that talk this year, but God became it. He really manifested himself, that one, whatever we call it, that light, that superconscious entity, that perfect love, that Christ consciousness was one. And that force was made manifest into everything that exists on the earth. And that was the point of that first talk, that God became everything. And that because God became everything, if anything, never mind anyone, because we're now highly evolved souls to have come to a human birth, traces their beginnings back, and we've talked about this many times, we could find ourselves in that perfect place of stillness and oneness, both within and without. We would remember, which is why it's so important to have that reading, that God became the universe, because then we can remember that it's not deeply, we are all one and all connected. Then he talked about Om in either week 2 or week 3, and he talked about the vibration that it took to physically manifest all of what we see. That in that vibration, the consciousness of God became all of us. It became everything. And that string of vibration connects all of us. Again, a way to get back to our origins and the place, again, of perfect love, of perfect stillness, of deep inner peace. And now he's talking to us about the Avatar, the way that these great souls who have managed to let go of their ego and bring their consciousness perfectly in tune with that divine consciousness, who are living purely in a soul reality, that when we need them, as we say every week, a prayer of love went up from earth and you responded. What is that you? A ray of light flashed out from the heart of infinity, burst downward through night skies of consciousness. You'll hear this. And as it says later, called to earth by the prayer and the love of aspiring souls. That's what happens. We open our hearts, we say we need you, and that aspect of the divine descends in so many ways over forever, since the beginning of time. Sometimes as pure light, sometimes as a sound. We hear about it as rushing waters or thunder. Sometimes as a real voice. God appeared to Moses as a burning bush that never burned up. He came to St. Francis and said, "Rebuild my church." And he appears to us in human form whenever virtue declines and vice dominates. That's what happens. That being comes. But here's what's important for us to remember. None of those manifestations, not the light, not the sound, not the human form, not the burning bush, none of it defines that ultimate reality. It represents it. It's a form. It comes. It's part of all that is. But no one way that God can present is all of what God is. And that is just as true for each of us. We can't say, just like Yogananda always said, a wave wouldn't say, "I'm the ocean." We cannot say, "I am God." We're not all of it, but we can say, "I'm part of the ocean." And we can know that the wave folds back in and becomes impossible to differentiate or pull back out of the ocean. That is our divine reality. That is why all of these avatars come, is to show us. And I'm confused now. I'm not sure if it's in the reading or if it's in my head, but it's the truth. Anyway, that they don't come as these perfected beings that just exist in a way that we can't relate to. What would be the point of that? Then we just sit here and say, woe's be to me, I'll never be able to be perfect. Then, in fact, we would be like the teachings of many religions of the world, where we have to sit here and notice Master and Swamiji up there, or all of these beautiful avatars behind me, and just have a longing in our heart that could never be fulfilled. Our avatar, Paramhansa Yogananda, was sent here. This is what is meant by new dispensation, to say, of course, this is you too. Your divine reality is that you are a part of all that is. Because when God made himself manifest, that divine reality went out into every atom of creation. And that means us. So whatever we've forgotten, whatever has drawn us out, whatever has us living life right now in terms of an egoic reality that has us believing that we're separate, all of these readings, God became the universe. He manifested it through a vibration. The avatar that is both in the avatars that we see, but who only come to tell us, you are the avatar. Your job in this very life is to make incarnate that avatar. Yogananda said to us, remember, God loves you every bit as much as he loves me. He told us that. And Jesus said, in so many ways in the Bible, everything I am, you are too. They come to remind us over and over. It's not something that's unattainable. You know, this past month we started our winter class of Raja Yoga. And I've taken this class many times, and now I've had the great privilege of teaching it, or parts of it, many times. It's thrilling. It's absolutely thrilling that in 14 lessons, Swami Kriyananda showed us all of the ways to remember what this reading embodies. I wanted to read to you, because I was away for the first 3 weeks, which I keep saying, but when I came back to the fourth week, I was teaching. And I was teaching a rather challenging topic for people who are just walking in. They've never heard of these words, like at least most of us in this church today have heard consciousness, superconsciousness, divine reality. Every atom is dowered with individuality. We hear these things all the time. We're a part of all that is. We're all one. But people taking Raja Yoga are just walking in the front door, looking for something, they're not sure what. But like so many of us, it's a heart call. Something says to them, I want something. They have no idea. So what happens as soon as their minds kick in? They come in, they sit down, and we start talking to them. And we start using this language. And I was sitting here on Thursday night thinking, what an incredible leap of faith it takes for those people to stick with it, just to stick with it. But here's what Swamiji says in the very first chapter. He puts this right out. It's about the second paragraph from the Raja Yoga class. He says, because the first class is about the history of yoga, so I had to put this first sentence in for the sentence that I want you to hear to make sense. But he says, it's only the more perceptive people, even in our sophisticated age, who recognize that all things, no matter how diverse, reflect an underlying unity. Science tells us that a loaf of bread is not essentially different from a stone, both being manifestations of energy. This is a very cute phrase, his next phrase. Even the scientist commonly finds this a hard crust to swallow. I love that. To primitive man, the thought would appear absurd. So he's talking about the history. But listen to this. Yet it is this thought which forms the very basis of yoga, the actual meaning of which is union. It is the stated aim of this science to take the practitioner or yogi to an awareness not only of the underlying unity of all things, but also of his own essential identity with this deeper reality. So right in paragraph 2, Swamiji says to everybody walking in to take Raja Yoga, we're all connected. There's only one reality here, and it's that we all came from the same place. We're all part of the same energy. We all have the ability to become avatars. We are avatars. We've just forgotten. And our job is to find ways to remember. It doesn't really matter what role we've been given to play in this life. It doesn't matter at all. But our job is to remember that God is behind all of it. That's what the avatars say over and over when they come so lovingly. Let me show you the way back to this reality that you're seeing me live in. Let me help you. It's such an incredibly loving thing. I was thinking of Paramhansa Yogananda and his two most highly evolved disciples. One was Rajarsi Janakananda, a man, and the other was Sister Gyanamata. And they both attained pure soul freedom, either in this life or at the moment of their death. Rajarsi was a self-made multimillionaire. He was out in the world. He ran huge businesses that had to do with insurance companies and railroad companies. And Master kept saying to him, this is how I'm going to work through you. This is what I want you to be doing. Sister Gyanamata, she never wrote a book. She never gave a lecture. She never taught. She would sleep in a cot in the laundry room when visitors came. They both attained soul freedom. It doesn't matter what we've been given to do. What matters is that we remember that it's that divine reality working through us. We have to remember that we will never be able to find that realization in this world of Maya. It's an impossibility. We cannot get ourselves back to that avatar that exists within us right now, that these avatars are so lovingly wanting to show us. We have to find ways to raise our consciousness up above this seeming reality. We have to be able to say to ourselves over and over and to find ways to do it. It's not easy. That's why that talk that I was supposed to give, I'm not even sure I ever got around to giving it on Thursday night, to getting right to the topic. It's called Life is a Battlefield. And it's such a hard thing to say to newer people on the path. But it's true for them, and it's equally true for us. We are here to fight this inner battle, to find that courage, that strength, to raise our consciousness above all of this. And while we're talking about raising and expanding, what we're doing is we're just following those threads back to that place where we are one with all that is. When I was reading Swamiji's, I've said this before, this is a short little explanation of the reading, and this is from a book called Rays of the One Light. And then he's written a book called Rays of the Same Light. And in that, there's a broader explanation that Swamiji's written about each reading. And as I was reading that last night, it just came to me, this is what it means when we say every week in our festival, for you are a part of all that is. We say those words over and over. They're so hard because the mind can't grasp it. It's not an egoic reality. It's the last thing in the world the ego wants to hear. And it fights, and it puts up a very good fight. But it is a soul reality. We are a part of all that is. We come from the very same source, and that source has never left us. There's a woman who came to see me the other day. I had never met her before, but she's now been meditating for a few months, and she wanted to talk to me about Kriya. Lovely woman. And she was telling me how hard it is to meditate. But she's meditating twice a day, every day. But she kept reminding me how hard it is. I kept saying, I know. Then she would remind me again, and then I'd say, I know. But she was not believing that I knew because, whatever. It's easier for her to think maybe it's not. It does not stay as hard as those first few months. That's the truth. But she said to me, but Shanti, here's what I felt. Even those days where the meditation is so hard, where my mind has been so restless, where I've spent more time bringing it back than I have being able to be quiet, by far. She said, somehow I'm noticing later in the day that the days are better, that life is better, that I'm dealing differently. She said, the meditations are so challenging, and yet I really can feel already them having an impact. And I hear that in different language so often, and that's the language that says our heart hasn't forgotten. Our heart knows what it needs. Our souls didn't go anywhere. They're just waiting for us to remember and to come back and live in terms of their reality. That's all. To let go of, I have to get dinner, what's happening in the stock market, all of the things. Is this the right job? Is this the right partner? Everything. And the soul's just waiting for us to come back and remember who we are. And then we go into those relationships, we do that job, depending on whether you're Rajasi or you're Sister Gyanamata or you're Lahiri Mahashai. Here's another perfect example. He's called into the mountains. He leaves his accounting job. He's an accountant, married with a family. He goes up, and Babaji, for those of you who have read the autobiography, manifests a palace for him because he wanted to rid him of all desire, because now he was going to come to this state of being an avatar. No desire, no likes, no dislikes. If anywhere in your consciousness you actually wanted a little crystal at some point, a little jewel, here, I'm going to put it into this palace for you. And he gives him Kriya Yoga, this very high form of meditation. And then he says, now go back and be an accountant. And Lahiri really, at first, like, really? Yeah. Your job is to go back and be an accountant. Your job is to show everyone who comes back and reads these words that you went back to your wife, back to your family, back to your job, but you lived as an avatar. They all come to say to us, whatever you need to do in this life, you can be living as an avatar. This morning, Lahari said a few words before our purification ceremony, and I teased her later that she gave my sermon, which she actually did. I don't even think she knew what the reading was, but she was just up here telling the truth. And so she gave the sermon. I thought, darn, I wish everybody had been here. I could have said, let's just meditate on that. But one of the things that she said, and it was so beautiful, and she said it beautifully, is that if we open our hearts to receive, because when Jesus said to all those who could receive him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God. What does that all mean? That means receiving means opening our hearts so that we can receive God's perfect love, that we can vibrate, not with this vibration of material world, but with that utterly fine vibration of divine love, and be one with God again. And as she said this morning, it can just happen in a moment, in an instant. It doesn't take any time. And that is the truth. That's what all miracles are. They're just the truth. That's what it means to receive him. And then when we talk about the only begotten, just the other half of that, the Son of God, the only begotten, what does that mean? It means that Christ consciousness. And it's only the only begotten because it's omnipresent. There is nothing else. We're all that. We're all that. I keep saying it. But it's so exciting to read it in this reading. That's what we're here doing. We're here getting back to the perfect love of God, the perfect joy of God, the perfect light of God, all those ways that he's manifest to that place of pure Christ consciousness that is perfect divine love, omnipresent, omniscient. It's such an extraordinary knowing. Swamiji just says, oh yes, it's in you. I wanted to close today by reading, this is a day of beginnings. Swamiji, I'd like to read to you the first page of his book, The New Path. It's just so perfect for today that I had to read it again right at the beginning of his book. He says, there are times when a human being, though perhaps not remarkable in himself, encounters some extraordinary person or event that infuses his life with great meaning. My own life, Swamiji says, was blessed with such an encounter more than 60 years ago in 1948. So he wrote, this is The New Path in 2008. Right here in America, of all lands, the epitome of bustling efficiency, material progressiveness, and pragmatic know-how, I met a great God-known master whose constant vision was of eternity. His name was Paramhansa Yogananda. He was from India, though it would be truer to say that his home was the whole world. Had anyone suggested to me prior to that meeting that so much radiance, dynamic joy, unaffected humility and love might be found in a single human being, I would have replied, though perhaps with a sigh of regret, that such perfection is not attainable by man. And had anyone suggested to me further that divine miracles have occurred in this scientific age, I would have laughed outright. For in those days, proud as I was in my intellectual 20th century wisdom, I mocked even the miracle of Bibles. No longer, Swamiji says, I have seen things that made a mockery of mockery itself. I know now from personal experience that divine wonders do occur on earth. And I believe that the time is approaching when countless men and women will no more think of doubting God than they doubt the air they breathe. For God is not dead. It is man only who dies to all that is wonderful in life when he limits himself to worldly acquisitions and to advancing himself in worldly eyes. God is not dead. It is man only who dies to all that is wonderful in life when he limits himself to worldly acquisitions and to advancing himself in worldly eyes, but overlooks those spiritual realities which are the foundation of all that he truly is. And I think if ever we forget, if ever we feel lost, in the moments when we can't meditate, when we're too restless to sit, if we open the first page of the path and we read those beautiful words coming so purely through Swami Kriyananda, and we say to ourselves, I am not dead, and I am not letting myself die. There is an avatar right here, right now. Paramhansa Yogananda said many things to us, but he used phrases like center everywhere, circumference nowhere. He talked about the point of intuitive perception. He told us every atom is endowed with individuality. What was he talking about? He was saying that no matter where we are the center. Wherever we are the center of all that is. And that's almost macro, because that is true of every atom in our body. I'll tell you one more thing and then I'll close. Asha and I had a day in Israel where we went to meditate at the tomb of King David, who was in Jerusalem thousands of years ago, really trying to draw the Jewish people together. And as we were sitting there, deep in meditation, Swami Kriyananda, when he meditated there, he said he felt a very deep and real vibration in that spot. It happened to be noon, and all of a sudden, all of the church bells, this is Jerusalem, lots of churches, really a lot of churches. All of the church bells start ringing, and then all of the Muslim call to prayer over these loud speakers that you hear throughout the city. You're in your hotel room at night, outside of the wall, and if it's prayer time, you hear it. And right next to us, because the tomb of David is into what they have now made into a synagogue. And the women on one side, Orthodox, men on the other. The men are over there davening, constantly saying these prayers out loud. And there you sit, right in the center of it all. And you realize all of these people want the same thing. Every one of them. The Jews, the Muslims, the Christians, the Armenian Christians, everybody who has a little square of the city of Jerusalem. And they do. They each have their own squares. But they're all calling to God. They're all saying something more than this exists. They're all sitting right at the center of everything in Jerusalem and calling to God. it is the most extraordinary reminder of who we are, of what our potential is, and how none of us, here we are, being given the privilege of being able to walk our talk. We're here because we want to know. Don't waste a moment. Don't waste a moment. Sit down. If all you say is Hang Sa, the first thing many of you have learned in meditation, I am that. If you haven't learned it, just say it. Sit down. I am that. I am that. I am that. That's what we all want. That's where we are. Let's just come in, come together, and get back to it. Bless you all.
One of those many things we call a theme song of Ananda. This is really the song that expresses best from Swami Kriyananda's compositions what we feel about living in that shared expansive community together.
Is there anywhere on earth perfect freedom, sorrow's dearth, selfless friendship, blameless